Hi everyone, we're back with the second P, Chapter 9, Pricing. So what is price? Basically it's exchange. How much money is charged, how much money is charged, how much money is charged by the manufacturer or the marketer that they would like to receive, and then how much money the customer is willing to give. So it's sort of a meeting of both. So it's an exchange between the two of them. So this is, I like to show these slides because it's just kind of a good overview. I think that sometimes it's good to see pictorial representation. So on the one hand, you think about the product costs, and then on the other hand, on the other side, the product cost in this case is on the left, and the customer perception of value is on the right. And then in between that, you're sort of thinking about what the competition is doing, other external factors in terms of the economy, what's going on with the market demand, all that kind of thing. You're also concerned about what your own goals are and what your company image is and all that kind of thing. Okay, so essentially there are three overall pricing strategies: value-based, cost-based, and competition-based. And then within that, there are also different types of methodologies and types of pricing. But first, we're going to go through them one by one. First, I'm going to talk about value-based, then the cost-based, and the competition-based. So value-based pricing, as you know, the idea is that we want to create value and build strong customer relationships. And value can be defined in many different ways. It can be based on quality. It can be based on brand name. It can be based on availability. It can be based on timing, all this kind of thing. So value is to a certain extent in the eye of the beholder, but it's essentially the buyer's perception of the value rather than on the seller's cost. So a lot of times price is considered before the marketing program is set. We'll see that as we go along a little bit. And essentially there are two different types of value-based pricing: good value pricing and value-added pricing. So, what happened there? Sorry. So, I'm sorry. Ignore me. There we go. Cost-based pricing. Cost-based pricing is based on the cost of not only manufacturing the product, but also the distribution and the selling and all that kind of thing. And then a fair rate of return. So essentially there are fixed costs, variable cost, and together they equal total cost. So some of these things you might know a little bit from your, some of it might be covered in economics and also in accounting, but just as a review, fixed costs are things like overhead. So let's say that you have a bakery, right? So some of your fixed costs are going to be things like insurance, your rent or your mortgage payment, maybe if you have a lease on equipment, or if you're paying off the equipment, if you're over time, or amortizing it, whatever. It's fixed costs. It's not going to change. Variable costs are things that change based on production. So, for example, if you make 100 cakes, you're going to pay the same rent or the same mortgage or the same insurance payment, or you're going to lease the equipment for the same amount. But your products the product cost is going to change. So you're going to spend more on flour and sugar and butter and eggs and all that kind of thing. Now it depends, as you probably know from accounting, everyone sets up their books differently and everyone runs their business differently. Salary may or may not be part of variable cost. It depends. But anyway, but the point is that fixed costs, which is overhead, they never change. Variable costs change based on quantity produced. That's the bottom line on that. Okay, so cost-based pricing, you can either have cost plus, which is adding a standard markup, or break even, just setting the price so you just get your money back. Usually that's in instances of, everyone wants to make a profit in business, but usually that's an instance maybe of a sale or if you're trying to get into the market and you're interested in gaining market share. Okay, so just to give you this is just another visual representation of cost, of value-based versus cost-based. So cost-based pricing starts with a product and ends with convincing buyers of the product value. Whereas Value-based pricing starts with what the customer's perception of the value is, and ends with trying to design the product. So they start at different places and end up with these different types of prices. Okay, finally, there is competition-based pricing. Basically, setting prices on what your competitors are doing. One kind of classic example of that are gas stations. So how many times have you seen a gas station? There's maybe 2 or 3 gas stations on one corner, and one company, one firm raises the price of the gas, and the other firm also might raise the price of the gas, or maybe they put it down a penny in an effort to get more business. So anyway, competition-based pricing, it can affect it to increase or decrease. But essentially, hey, if the guy down the street can get away with charging this amount, then why can't I? Or if the guy down the street is charging this amount, I'm going to charge that amount minus X to get more people in. Okay, so there are a couple of things to think about when you're deciding about whether or not, your pricing strategy. Internal factors. So what's your overall marketing strategy? What are you trying to do? What's the rest of your mix like? What's going on in your organization at the time? And then external factors. Is there a demand for your product? How many other products like it are in the market? What's the economy like? Will this have a negative or a positive effect on our publics? So all those things are things that are discussed internally. Okay, so overall marketing strategy, objectives, and mix. So essentially, remember we talked about positioning the product, and the idea is that it has to. We're going to talk about this again, but this whole idea of integrated marketing communications is sort of a part of this. That everything should flow together. So if you have a low-priced product, you're probably not going to sell it at a high-end store. If you have a high-priced product, you're not going to sell it at a low-end store. So if you have, a pair of shoes that you're going to sell for $159, you're probably not going to sell them at Target because that's not, or a store like Target, because that's not the image that Target has. That's not the type of market that Target has. So Target or Walmart or whatever you want to, whatever company of that nature you want to put in that category. So also, does the packaging match it? Are you promoting, is the promotion that you're coming up with the quote unquote story you have in your promotion and your advertisement and the people you have, does that match with the objective of your overall objective of the company as well? So the idea is that it's all pricing is the pricing decision is also involved with the other 4 P's. Okay, so price elasticity, we've talked about this before. The idea of price elasticity is that it affects demand. So if you have inelastic demand, that means that demand will not change with a small change in price. Whereas if you have elastic demand, demand does change with a small change in price. So we talk about gas. The price of gas went up, but demand didn't change, so it's inelastic. Okay, moving on. New product pricing. So essentially there are 2 different methods that you can follow with new product pricing. One is market skimming or price skimming. You set a high price to increase your revenues. And then you make fewer sales, but they're more profitable. iPhones are a prime example of that they start out with a very high price, and then it's an effort to make a lot of money. Market penetration, on the other hand, is when you go through and you set a very low price in an effort to get market share. So you're trying to attract buyers. And then eventually you'll increase the price. Once you hook those buyers in, then you increase the price. Okay, so there's a couple of different product mix pricing strategies. They're in the book. In the current book, it's table 9.1 on page 278, and they go through and they talk about it in detail, but you should be aware of it. Product line pricing is this idea of all of your, we talked about product lines last time, and there's one product line, each distinct product line has a different pricing strategy. So for example, Honda and Acura has two different pricing strategies. Toyota and Lexus, they have different product lines. Another example would be, I think we talked about this before too, with Old Navy, The Gap, and Banana Republic. Those are different product lines, and so they go with different prices. Optional product pricing is this idea that you can buy an item and then you get extra add-ons to it. So a car, you might have a navigation system, which of course, well, yeah, so you might add on the navigation system. So you can, you're sort of, hooked into getting that price. With a, hotel, they might add on to it, they might increase the price, but in the meantime, they also, with a hotel reservation, you might get discounts at the restaurant or something like that. Captive product pricing is this idea that you need to, when you buy one product, you're obliged to buy supplemental products that go with it. So for example, ink for a printer, razor blades for a razor, that kind of thing, that once they have you, then you got to buy it. You're captive to them. Byproduct pricing is this idea that sometimes when people manufacture things, like for example, cheese, the list left over, there's a cheese curd, so that's not going to go into the cheese that necessarily the original product they're manufacturing, but it's extra and they have it left over, so they add it on, and or they create this new product, and it's considered byproduct pricing. Then product bundle pricing is when you have you bundle products together and hopefully at a reduced rate. The sort of the classic example of that is a Happy Meal. So you go to McDonald's and you get a hamburger and French fries and a drink or whatever for a certain price. That would be less expensive. Tim Hortons does it. Hotel, airline, rental car, that kind of thing. That's product bundling. You also might see shampoo and conditioner sold together. Okay, so price adjustment strategies, we're going to go through these one by one. I'm going to talk about them one by one. So here we go. All right, so discounts. A lot of these times, and we're going to talk about this more when we get into wholesaling and retailing, and we talk about which is the place, which is the next P we're going to cover in this section. It's chapters 10 and 11. So anyway, discount, straight reduction in price during a stated period of time or of larger quantities. You see that for consumers as well, for direct to consumers. And then allowance is some kind of promotional money. And then then the manufacturer passes it on to you. So sometimes you'll see, offers in a supermarket or something like that. And they will, you might even see it at a couple of supermarkets. So, maybe Kellogg's is having some sort of allowance. And so there's a special deal they give the special deal to the retailer passes it on to the consumer. Okay, segmented pricing, selling the products to two or more prices. It's not necessarily based on cost. Sometimes you'll see that geographically, that something that costs, X in Buffalo is going to cost X plus Y in New York City. It might be based on the customer. Maybe there's a lower price for frequent consumer shoppers or infrequent consumer shoppers, that kind of thing. Location-based, time-based. You might get a discount if you buy early. Now you might get a discount on things for the next season. And when the season gets closer, it's also the price might increase. Some sports teams do that it's one price, and as an effort to fill the arena or the stadium, as it gets closer to the date of the event, they might increase the price because they want to hang on to they want to try to get as many seats sold as possible from the get-go. Okay, psychological pricing. Essentially talks about the psychology of pricing. And obviously psychological pricing, but what goes on in people's heads. It's not just about the economy, it's also about what people's perception of it is. So that the price says something about the product. So it's this idea of the $500 purse versus the $50 purse. What's the difference? $450 in some instances. Some instances there truly is a quality difference, but or a style difference or whatever. But that's essentially that the price says something about the product. Also, psychological pricing, you can also talk about off pricing, like, $4.99, whole dollar pricing versus cents off pricing. And then reference prices is this idea that, particularly when you go to the grocery store and you look at generic items. So the General Mills Cheerios might be $4.29 a box, and then the generic brand is $3.79. And even though both are kind of high, you still think, well, it's going to be the same thing. I'll buy the lesser one. Or maybe you just feel like, hey, I don't know. I don't trust that the generic one is good, so I'm gonna buy the name brand. So it's this idea of reference pricing, putting one next to the other. You see that too, to a certain extent, like at movie theaters for the price of the popcorn. Just a little bit more, and for just $1 more, you get the large size. Okay, promotional pricing essentially is this idea that there's temporarily pricing products below list price. Always the goal for promotional pricing is to increase short-run sales, or to clear out inventory. So there's different kinds of promotional pricing, special event pricing, Black Friday or 4th of July sale or Christmas sales or after Christmas sales, limited time offers on certain things. What the department stores do that. There's extra reduced prices between 10 and noon, that kind of thing. Also, they'll offer you low interest financing and longer warranties. You see that a lot with the furniture stores and the mattress stores. And then they also will offer you sometimes free maintenance or free upkeep, that in an effort to get the products out the door. Okay, dynamic and online pricing. It's this idea that dynamic means that things are constantly changing. That dynamic pricing changes the prices based on what they know about the consumer. They can mine data in terms of what you've previously bought. They reference in the book LL Bean and Amazon that they know what you've been purchasing and what your purchasing habits are, and so from that they can change the price accordingly based on characteristics. And maybe if you're an infrequent shopper, they know that you're sort of ripe to buy things. They're gonna increase the cost or keep the cost as it is. If they know that you're more of a hesitant consumer, they're gonna give you a discount. And it's old time bartering to a certain extent. But really, dynamic pricing has been ushered in by the internet and online accessibility. So it's this idea of fluid pricing. The other thing that would go along with dynamic and online pricing is price matching. And you can go through. If you're interested in buying TurboTax, or you're interested in buying a new television set, some places do price matching. So you can match up and say, well, hey, Best Buy had it for this amount, and so you can go to Target, and Target will say, okay, well, then we'll match that amount. It's a new world. Dynamic pricing is part of the new world. Okay, international pricing. The things you want to think about, there are also all sorts of different things to consider, not the least of which are taxes and tariffs. You have to think about local market conditions and costing considerations, what the laws and the regulations are, basically what their system is like, that you need to know what their economy is and their culture is like before you set up a price structure there. Okay, and then price changes. There's a couple of reasons for price cuts. Maybe you have too much inventory, also called excess capacity, falling demand, depending upon where you are in the product life cycle, or perhaps you really just want to dominate the market and get as much market share as possible, so you also might cut the prices. So reasons that price increase is inflation, and if there's an increased demand for your product. Okay, and finally, we like to talk about public policy issues and pricing. Public policy, of course, are sort of the unwritten rules of unwritten laws that are dictated by other laws. So, for example, in our country, we have minimum wage and we have the 40-hour work week, things like that. So, taking advantage of workers is technically against public policy. Um, So deceptive pricing, because consumer groups, the rise of consumer groups, and that kind of thing, that people do not, deceptive pricing is looked upon poorly. Um, Discriminatory pricing is looked upon poorly, taking advantage of poor or disadvantaged customers. Price gouging, when you have a situation, say in a time of a flood or some sort of natural disaster, taking advantage of people by charging exorbitant rates for hotel rooms or for bottled water or gas or something like that. It's the idea that that you don't want predatory pricing and price fixing is just a big fat no. That it's against our public policy. It's against um, the rules and laws of this country or whatever country you may be in. Okay, so that's it for chapter 9, and we're going to do 10 and 11 next, which will focus on the third P, the place. So we're talk about distribution. We'll next talk about distribution and then retailing and wholesaling. But until then, that's it on price, and thanks everyone.